had a dream, and then I turn on the lights and she's dead on the floor.
How?
I have blood all over me, and there's a bloody knife on the bed, and I think I did it.
The man on the line is 28-year-old Matthew James Phelps, a Bible college graduate, an aspiring pastor, and a husband of less than 10 months. The woman on the floor of their Patuxent Drive bedroom is his wife, Lauren Ashley-Nicole Hugelmaier Phelps. She is 29 years old. When first responders arrive, they find her lying in the fetal position. She is gone. The medical examiner will later determine she sustained 123 sharp force injuries. Matthew Phelps is placed in handcuffs before sunrise. He would spend the next 13 months insisting he remembered nothing, that a bottle of over-the-counter cough medicine was responsible, that he was, in every meaningful way, innocent. This is the story of how a young woman who taught Sunday school, ran her own business, and loved her family, was brought to that bedroom floor, and what the people closest to her missed, and what they didn't. Lauren grew up in a close, religious household. Her parents, Dale and Laurie Hugelmaier, were devout Christians who provided a stable, loving home for Lauren and her two sisters. Of her siblings, Lauren was especially close to her older sister Beth. Friends and family consistently described Lauren as warm, independent, and deeply caring, someone who led with kindness before she led with anything else. The family eventually relocated to North Carolina before Lauren finished high school, settling into a new community with the same tight-knit faith that had always anchored them. Lauren would go on to build a life there, one with professional ambition, a church community she genuinely served, and a future she was actively constructing. By her late 20s, she was teaching Sunday school at her local church and had launched her own small business. She was, by every available measure, a young woman in full motion. She had not yet crossed paths with Matthew Phelps in any meaningful way, not since childhood, anyway. Matthew grew up in the same general region of Kentucky as Lauren, though the two were not close as children. He was raised in a religious environment and pursued that path into adulthood, enrolling at Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, a school affiliated with the Kentucky Baptist Convention where he studied missions and evangelism. To those who knew him during those years, Matthew appeared committed to his faith. He was clean-cut, socially engaged, and spoke openly about his calling to ministry. He presented as someone whose life had clear direction and settled purpose. But there was another version of Matthew Phelps operating quietly beneath that surface. He maintained an Instagram account under the name Marty Radical. The account was filled with content referencing the 2000 film American Psycho, a story about a high-functioning man who leads a double life concealing a pattern of calculated violence. Matthew did not simply post images from the film. He posed as the main character in photographs. He had also told at least one friend directly that he was curious about what it would feel like to take another person's life. He also carried a persistent pattern of financial instability. He spent money the household did not have on digital entertainment, on impulse purchases, and the gap between his spending and his income was not something Lauren could close by simply asking him to stop. None of this was visible to Lauren's family. Not yet. In their mid-20s, Matthew reached out to Lauren through Instagram. What began as reconnecting over a shared childhood background developed into something more deliberate. The two started a long-distance relationship, Matthew still in Kentucky, Lauren in North Carolina. Within months, Matthew relocated. The relationship moved quickly. To Lauren's family, Matthew seemed attentive, devoted, and sincere. Her sister Beth would later recall that he appeared to love Lauren completely and seemed willing to do anything to make her happy. Dale Hugelmaier, Lauren's father, gave Matthew his blessing to propose. When Matthew formally asked for permission to marry his daughter, Dale made one request, that Matthew promise to protect her. Matthew made that promise. The wedding took place in November of 2016. The couple settled into a home on Patuxent Drive in Raleigh. On social media, Their life looked exactly like what a young Christian couple's life was supposed to look like. Church involvement, shared photographs, optimism performed in public. Behind closed doors, the picture was already beginning to fragment. In the months following the wedding, Lauren began to understand things about her husband that the courtship had not revealed. The financial problems were constant. Matthew's spending was not a phase, it was a pattern that Lauren was now responsible for managing. She had tried, repeatedly, to establish limits. Matthew repeatedly ignored them. The tension this created did not resolve. It accumulated. What investigators would later piece together was that Lauren had, in the final weeks of her life, reached a decision. She had confided in close friends that she was planning to end the marriage. She had sent text messages and made phone calls in the hours before her death, communicating that she was exhausted by the ongoing conflict and was done. She was not wavering. She was planning. What Lauren may not have fully understood was what her husband was doing with the same information. The American Psycho photographs, the admitted curiosity about causing harm, the financial entanglement that a divorce would force into the open, the identity of a man who had constructed himself publicly as a devoted, faith-driven husband, an identity that would not survive a separation initiated by his wife. No one outside Matthew's immediate social circle was aware of the warning signs accumulating in plain sight. No system intervened. No one connected the pieces. On the evening of August 31st, 2017, the night before Labor Day, Lauren and Matthew were home together on Patuxent Drive. Matthew Phelps told police that before going to sleep that night, he had taken Coricide HBP cold and cough, a common over-the-counter medication containing dextromethorphan, known as DXM. He said he had taken more than the recommended dose. He said he remembered nothing after that. He said he woke in the early hours of September 1st to find Lauren gone and himself covered in blood. He said he did not know what had happened. He said the knife on the bed was not something he could explain. He called 911. First responders arrived within minutes. They found Lauren on the bedroom floor, curled in a fetal position, holding clumps of her own hair in both hands. Matthew was taken into custody at the scene without resistance. Investigators processed the home on Patuxent Drive through the early morning hours. The physical evidence was extensive. What they found told a story inconsistent with Matthew's account in several critical ways. Investigators would later state that evidence pointed toward premeditation rather than impulsive, unplanned action. They also determined that before placing the 911 call, Matthew had made an effort to clean the scene, a detail that stood in direct conflict with the portrait of a man who had awoken in confusion and panic. The medication Matthew claimed to have taken contains dextromethorphan. In very large doses, DXM can produce disorientation and altered states of awareness. Matthew's defense leaned on this pharmacological reality. But the toxicology results did not support the narrative. Laboratory analysis confirmed that cold medication compounds were present in Matthew's system. The concentrations, however, were determined by expert analysis to be far below any threshold associated with hallucinations, blackout states, or a loss of voluntary control. The amount he had taken was consistent with someone who had taken cold medicine, not someone incapacitated by it. The manufacturer of Coricide, when contacted by media at the time, confirmed that no evidence existed linking their product to violent behavior of any kind. The medical examiner's findings made Matthew's story even harder to sustain. 123 sharp force injuries, concentrated on Lauren's head, neck, and torso. The autopsy was not consistent with a single, disoriented act. It was consistent with sustained, deliberate action. On September 28, 2017, 27 days after Lauren's death, a Wake County grand jury indicted Matthew Phelps on one count of first-degree murder. For more than 13 months following his arrest, Matthew Phelps maintained that he had not intentionally harmed his wife. The cough medication claim remained the center of his public-facing narrative. A small group of supporters argued on his behalf in online spaces, framing him as a victim of an overzealous prosecution. Lauren's family did not engage with that framing publicly. Prosecutors, meanwhile, continued building a case that extended well beyond the physical evidence at the scene. They documented the American psycho fixation. They documented the conversation in which Matthew had told a friend he wanted to know what it felt like to end a life. They documented the financial pattern, the marital deterioration, and the evidence that Lauren had already decided to leave him. They also noted, in court documents, that when detectives interviewed Matthew in the hours immediately following the incident, he displayed no visible emotional distress. He did not cry. He answered questions with a composure that trained investigators found significant. The case was not building toward a mystery. It was building toward a reckoning. More than 50 people filled the courtroom that morning in support of Lauren. They wore blue shirts bearing the phrase, "Lauren's Light." They wore purple ribbons and buttons carrying her photograph. They had driven in from across the state, from Kentucky, from wherever Lauren's life had touched theirs. Matthew Phelps entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder. The plea was part of a negotiated agreement. In exchange for the admission, the state would not pursue the death penalty. Matthew would spend the remainder of his natural life in a North Carolina correctional facility with no possibility of parole. His attorney was straightforward about the terms. Matthew was choosing life in prison over the possibility of something worse. The sentencing hearing lasted approximately 4 hours. One by one, the people who had known and loved Lauren stood before the court. Lauren's mother, Lauren Hugelmaier, addressed the room through tears. "The actions of Matthew James Phelps have forever changed me," she said. "This has broken me and my heart." Her sister Beth spoke about the complete trust their family had extended to Matthew, the open doors, the welcome, the full acceptance of a man who had presented himself as devoted. "He seemed to love Lauren in spite of any flaws she could have," Beth said. "What we didn't know was that he was playing a game, a very deadly game. He was luring all of us in, taking advantage of our kindness and generosity. We never once thought Lauren was in danger." Lauren's father, Dale, recalled the moment Matthew had asked his permission to marry his daughter. He recalled the promise. He spoke about the weight of not having seen what was in front of him. "I think about it every day," he said. "What I did wrong, what I missed. Till this day, I just regret not knowing." When Matthew addressed the court, he was physically transformed from the man arrested 13 months earlier. The clean-cut appearance was gone. In its place, long, unkempt hair and an unshaven face. He spoke briefly and without elaboration. "I feel like a monster," he said. "Part of the wretched, part of the darkness we don't speak of. This was a senseless, mindless act, and I regret every step that led me in that direction." He offered no new explanation, no new truth. Only words and the question of whether words, at that point, meant anything at all. Superior Court Judge Paul Ridgway sentenced Matthew James Phelps to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Matthew James Phelps remains incarcerated in the North Carolina correctional system. He will not be released. Lauren's family has continued to speak publicly. They have used their platform to raise awareness around the behavioral patterns that precede domestic violence, the financial control, the identity performance, the signs that are visible in retrospect and nearly invisible in real time. Dale Hugelmaier still carries the weight of the promise Matthew made to him, the promise to protect her. A promise that was either a deliberate deception from the beginning or a commitment that collapsed under something Dale could not have anticipated and did not know to look for. He says he thinks about it every day. Lauren was 29 years old. She had a business, a church family, 2 parents, and a sister who loved her completely. She had already made the decision to leave. She had told her friends. She had sent the messages. She did not get the chance to follow through. Lauren Ashley-Nicole Hugelmaier was a real person. Her name deserves to be said in full and remembered that way.